Thank you very much to Alok Sharma, President of COP26. Well, our next speaker is Laurent Fabius, President, Constitutional Court, and the former president of COP21, which led to the famous Paris Agreement. Mr. Fabius will give the introductory keynote to our panel, COP26, a crucial stepping stone on the path to a sustainable global recovery.
Good afternoon. As an introduction to this session, I would like to raise two questions and to bring some answers. The first question is this one: where are we with the Paris Agreement, which I had the honor to prepare and to chair? In 2015, the adoption of the Paris Agreement was undoubtedly a turning point. For the first time, it made the worldwide goals crystal clear. No more than 2 degrees or even 1.5 degrees of temperature increase by the end of this century, a mechanism of enhanced nationally determined contribution every 5 years, the aim of carbon neutrality by the second half of this century, more finance and technologies made available by rich countries to developing countries. And the conclusion today is that the text of the Paris Agreement did not solve everything, but it is very clear that nothing can be solved without it. The success of Paris was achieved, as I see it, thanks to the alignment of 3 planets. The science planet, which was decisive to establish the reality of global warming. What I call the society planet, I mean regions, cities, corporations, economic and financial stakeholders, NGOs, as well as individuals all around the world. But, and we must bear that in mind, the decisive factor was the political planet. Beyond the strong commitment of the EU, the active support of China, of the US, of India, and of many countries has been decisive in Paris. Before Paris, the trend of global warming was between 4 and 5 degrees, an increase. Today, it's about 3 degrees. It's better, but still, and I insist on that, much too high. The overall climate situation remains critical. The decision of President Trump to withdraw from the Paris Agreement was a heavy setback. Through a cascading effect, some other countries have felt entitled to ignore their own commitments. And as a matter of fact, 2020 was the hottest year ever in the world. And despite the COVID lockdowns, the amount of CO2 reached record levels in 2020. And we see that storms, floods, droughts and fires all over the world have multiplied in recent months. And in terms of finance, disasters caused a total damage of more than $200 billion worldwide. It is therefore obvious that both for the states and for the non-state actors, it is urgent and necessary to fully implement the Paris Commitment. Now, my second question is this one. Why 2021, and particularly COP26, must and will be crucial? For at least 3 reasons. First, due to the pandemic, we all know that major environmental conferences, which were scheduled in 2020, will be held in 2021, and particularly COP15 on biodiversity in Kunming in China, and a COP26 on climate in Glasgow. Both these conferences have complementary fundamental issues, as it is demonstrated by the coronavirus crisis. Particularly, COP26 on climate will be crucial. States have to submit strong national contribution, specifying their climate commitments, but unfortunately, too few have already done and fulfilled their duties. Only 44 countries, plus the EU's 27 member states, met the deadline of 2020. Financing is and will be also fundamental. It is urgent to reach $100 billion a year from developed countries to help developing countries to fight against global warming. Technological innovation and social justice should be encouraged too. And I think that carbon pricing in particular is and will be a key issue. Therefore, the first reason why COP26 is decisive is that it is the gathering of 2020 and 2021. The second reason is that while globally the international context is very concerning, potentially it's more favorable in the climate domain. For the past few months, a more positive wind seems to be blowing. We see that the European Green Deal includes the commitment of member states to aim for effective carbon neutrality by 2050. At the UN General Assembly in last September, President Xi Jinping announced, and it is of great importance, that China, which represents more than 50% of world coal production and consumption, aims now to go carbon neutral by 2060. President Joe Biden promised to reintegrate the Paris Agreement on the first day of his term, that is to say precisely tomorrow, to take various and dramatic decisions toward a green economy and to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. Further, countries including South Korea, Japan, the UK, and so on and so forth have joined, and estimated 110 countries that have already committed to a net zero objective by 2050. And G7 and G20, which will be chaired in 2021 by the UK and Italy, this year will favor, I think, positive action. And last, the pressure of facts, of economic comparisons, and of public opinions matter more and more. The march by many countries to go net zero in 2050 is encouraged by the very critical climate situation and by the links between climate, biodiversity, and health problems. The increasingly low cost of most renewable is impressive. There is a growing public pressure in favor, more generally, of environmental themes. And most countries and corporations have well understood this logic. This leads businesses to greening their activities, whether public or private. And the network for greening the financial system, composed by more than 70 central banks, aims to make it mandatory for businesses and investors to show that their activities participate in building a net zero world. Therefore, and this is my main point, in short, in 2015, the key to the success of COP21 was an alignment between government, science, and society. And my belief is that in 2021, the chances of rebuilding such alignment exist again, particularly in COP26, even though some governments today are unfortunately still lagging behind. That is to say that in spite of our efforts up to now, we are not ambitious and quick enough. Long term, 2050 is now clear. Mid-term, 2030 is improving, but short term, and especially sustainable recovery plans in the context of coronavirus is not satisfactory. The key words for this year, and particularly for COP26, therefore, are urgency and action. They depend largely on government, but they depend on each of us. It means that I totally endorse the recent words of our friend, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. I quote, "Until now, we have been destroying our planet. 2021 must be the year to reconcile humanity and nature," unquote. And I think COP26 is fundamental to deliver things according to that direction. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that keynote, Mr. Fabius. I would now like to introduce Francesco La Camera. Francesco, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks to you.
Francesco, at my organization, Force of Nature, we create forums for intergenerational exchange. We connect young people around the world with leaders across business, civil society, and policy. And in the 10 or so years I've spent lobbying decision makers, working with students in the classrooms and leaders in the boardroom, I've witnessed a crisis in imagination. When I asked my parents about the future they envisioned as children, they describe flying cars and a world where deadly diseases were eradicated. Yet when I ask students today, 8 and 9-year-olds, to describe the future they see, it's one out of a dystopian blockbuster. Empty supermarket shelves, cities underwater, a planet in decline. The kind of place no one wants to find waiting for them when they grow up. On the other end of the generational spectrum, when I ask business leaders to imagine a world once we've solved the climate crisis, the most common response I receive is, what if it's an impossible problem? As you've mentioned previously, Francesco, COVID-19 provides us with a window to really press pause on our hyper-consumptive, fast-paced lives and imagine what a different tomorrow could really look like. So I'm asking you now, when you envision that future, when you imagine a world once we've enabled a green recovery, a green transition, a world where we have widespread renewable adoption, what does that future look like and what is it that you see?
So naturally, my point of view will be the point of view of someone that is working mainly in the energy field. So what I foresee, what I'm looking for too, is a world where renewables can play the major role in the energy system, complemented now by green hydrogen and bioenergy. So a world that is largely electrified, at least 50%, where renewables can be the 90% of source for generating electricity, 2/3 share of powering the energy that we need. Having car going with electric, having so not the noise of the car, so a clear world. But not only this, because I imagine that we will move from a centralized system to a decentralized one, where in some way the energy will be more democratized. So where there will be more freedom and also more capacity to solve the needs of the people that still doesn't enjoy the basic energy needs. So also not only a cleaner and wealth world, but also a fairer world. This is what I look for and I imagine.
Thank you, Francesco. And given your experience in all of the work that you do today, which legacy issues do you feel might be preventing us from reaching that future that you've just described?
This is a very complex question to answer. You know, life is made by social contact, interrelation, interest, crossing interest. So there is still many interests that are linked into the past. And this is one of the main problems. The other one is that when you wish to change something, and naturally want to change into the better, the fact is that people feel what they are losing sometimes, and they have no touching what we can get, what they can get with the change. So it's important that we overcome the difficulties to let people leave the old legacy, making clear how we can manage this transition into the new world without anyone paying a very heavy fees.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, ensuring that we don't leave anyone behind, and how it's so critical as we try to deliver on that future, that we realize we won't do so without also delivering, fair and equitable societies. So my question is, how? How do we ensure a green energy transition in which no one is left behind, and where that transition to a more beautiful, sustainable future is not at odds with development where people don't already have access to energy and technology and opportunity?
So, Clover, what is important to understand, and I think that the tragedy of this year is making clear that we can come out from the pandemic only if we work together. So if we left someone behind us, we will not be free of the pandemic. So I hope that this sense will make us be ready, working more closely together. And this also means that we have to work in a way that the benefit of the transition may be distributed equally. What does it mean? That we cannot be a world where some part of the world is just giving primary resources and the other manufacture everything. So we have also to create the industrial capacity where the supply chain and the added value chain may be part also of the developing country. So it's important that we support the path of this country to build the supply side also in their own system. I see some interesting experience now. For example, the agreement between Germany and Morocco on green hydrogen, where we may see how this could work well for both countries. In this case, Morocco and Germany. And this may apply in many parts of the world. So what is interesting in this part of our work as an intergovernmental organization is trying to let's clear government that we have to work together and making possible for everyone enjoy the benefits of going for a cleaner energy system.
Thank you, Francesco. And to that point around the critical importance of collaboration, I think we both know all too well how easy it is for these conversations to really fall into silos, what I sometimes call echo chambers. So we saw, even with the Youth Strikes for Climate in 2019, how there has really been a breakdown in conversation between generations. For one, people who feel that they're on the margins of power versus those who really hold the reins. But of course, there's also a breakdown between, those who are kind of already converted to this green and sustainable agenda on the fringes, and many of the incumbents who we've both worked with, who still largely feel that they're beholden to the very systems that are perpetuating climate collapse. So I'd love to know from your experience how you have gone about navigating some of those more polarized or difficult conversations, and how you really ensured that big players, for example, oil and gas, are neither sidelined nor allowed to remove themselves from the critical conversation?
So that's also a very good question. You know, sometimes I find difficult to explain that if you want the change happening and happening faster, we have to work with the oil gas company. It's very important that also our agency that has been related to the renewable energy, when we are working on energy transition, we also need to work with the oil and gas company. You know, the company are living body. So we have to try to intercept where they are the feeling of the need of new policies. I think there are people in the oil and gas that understand that investing in fossil fuel may be the stranded asset of the future. But we have been able to have a dialogue with them, trying to understand how the theory of change that we laid down in our global renewable outlook or in our post-COVID agenda may be implemented together. So where they can find the interest to go in that direction. So absolutely, I think that we have to work with everyone, including the youth, including all the stakeholders, because really what we are going to assist is a fundamental change in the way our economy and our society works. And when I think about working with all the stakeholders, you know, I took my seats in the April of the last year. And one of the first initiative that I brought to the attention of the membership and was very well received is to have this youth forum that we had the first time on the occasion of the 10th General Assembly. We had our second youth forum just a few days ago, and we have also the chance to have a couple of meetings during this difficult year. So now, if you allow me, I question you. How do I don't know how long or far you are or in deep you are in the work of ARENA and know what we are doing, etc. But I think it will be important to hear from you. How do you see, or what do you think ARENA or an intergovernmental organization as our can do to work more efficiently with the youth, like you know, the blog that you have, other initiative, how we can put all together and working for us, together with us, for a better world.
Thank you so much for the question, Francesco. I have the great privilege of getting to work with lots of young people from many corners of the world, and my fascination has always been around the kind of psychology of inaction. So understanding what gets in the way of us being able to take more meaningful steps on climate and the big pressing problems that are kind of defining my generation's lives. And what I often hear from young people is this belief that the system is too broken to create meaningful change. And where I feel that belief often stems from, because it's one that I've also fallen to, is when young people don't have visibility into these organizations that are pushing for really radical agendas, where there are so many people on the inside who are really trying to lead that change and really trying to lead by example. And I know that as an environmental activist, when I was 11 and 12 years old, it was very easy to assume that people in power didn't care, that they didn't have this kind of agenda on their minds. And I've since learned that I could not have been more wrong, having collaborated and worked with a lot of leaders. So I feel for big agencies, for big organizations, anyone who has power in this play, it's about inviting young people to the table. And it sounds like you're already doing that by way of kind of youth forums, but really appreciating the role of that intergenerational exchange. It's not just creating spaces for young people to be heard, but for young people to have a seat at the decision-making table. This generation, my generation, people younger than me are ultimately the ones who are going to be inheriting these problems. And so this is where we need to be equipping young people with the knowledge and skills and resources to understand how the system works and to understand how change can be made. And from people in positions of power, appreciating what it is that young people really bring to the table. And I mentioned that kind of crisis and imagination. I think young people have so much energy and determination and often haven't been in the system long enough for the wings of their imaginations to be clipped. So when given the space to have their voices heard and validated, we can create some really incredible solutions and ideas by bringing together the energy of youth with the real knowledge of experience. So I feel that you're already well on your way, Francesco, but would love to keep that conversation going.
When we have this youth forum, and we'll say very briefly, Keynote, that was a EU commissioner, say 5 years ago in the politics, no one talked about climate in their campaign for votes. Now the EU Commission coming with a new deal, and this was because of the youth engagement. So we will try to do our best to empower you, but come with concrete idea. I am here in the office in Abu Dhabi. Athens or London are not so far. Email us, come with us with proposal, and we'll try to have youth as much as possible to be involved in our work. So thank you very much again, Clover, for your hospitality.
Thank you so much for joining the conversation, Francesco. Lovely to meet you.
My pleasure.